Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm Serene. I'm your host for the Serene View. And today we have another episode of Constructive Arguments. Now, if you have no idea what it is, Constructive Argument is really about healthy disagreements on the net, being able to kind of hear different views of an issue, instead of, just hearing yourself and polarizing. And today I have with me Mr. Simon Matthews, a man I am really excited to be hosting because I have finally found a guy who is just as argumentative as me, right? So when I ask him, what do you want to argue about? He's like, anything, bring it on. I was like, yes, finally met my match. So, Simon, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Let me start at the. I'll start in a non-usual place. First of all, I feel like I'm on Saturday Night Live after that lovely introduction. This is my first LinkedIn Live. Haven't done this before, and thank you, Serene, for the opportunity to be here. I'll share with you that the most important thing to me in my life is the relationships that I have with my family. I'm very fortunate to have been married nearly 30 years, and I've got two adult boys who now live out of home and are themselves making a difference in the world in their own ways. So I'm very, very thrilled about that. I am a psychologist professionally. I very nearly wasn't. I nearly became a radio announcer, and actually dabbled in that for a few years early in my career. And then I very nearly became an airline pilot about 15 years ago, and the GFC brought that to a crashing halt. So here I am still as a psychologist after nearly 25 years, and doing various other things as well. I'm very, very passionate about health and well-being, and particularly the health and well-being of healthcare providers themselves. That's the thing that really drives me in my professional work. Anyhow, that's enough for the moment. I'm sure more will trickle out as we go on.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, for those of you who are here with us today, if you would like to introduce yourself as well, so please just drop it in to the comments, who you are, where you're from. And then for those of you who would like to bring on the challenge, please feel free to challenge us for whatever that we say today, because we are tackling one of the most controversial topics we can think of, which is, should vaccinations be mandated? Well, I'll let you fire the opening salvo. Simon, what do you think? Do you think it should be mandated?
I'm gonna start by saying, Serene, that this is an extraordinarily difficult topic, partly because it's so multidimensional. There are so many different elements to consider here. But in order to fire the first salvo, I am going to say I come down reasonably firmly on the side of public good. And public interest, and what's best for the most number of people. And I appreciate that there's lots of ways of slicing and dicing best, and how we might understand that. But I am more easily convinced by strong arguments for public health and well-being that mean that there are some things that I might need to forego in order to ensure the public good.
Okay, fair enough. And I did a poll last week in anticipation for today, and the poll says, should vaccinations be mandated? Well, 56% of people actually said no. 36 said yes, and 8% just don't know. They said maybe. So for those of you who have joined us today, do you think vaccination should be mandated? I think we've, over the course of the last few days, talked about it, like sliced it and diced it quite a few ways, right? And I really would like to kind of bring up some of these arguments. The first is, is COVID bad enough that we need vaccinations, right? Like, let's put this into perspective here, right? I think Gary brought up a great point in one of the comments, which is that how are we reporting COVID? I mean, yes, we are having more COVID deaths, but actually we're having a lot less flu deaths. We're actually having a lot less death of other kind, right? So when we look at COVID as a whole, are the numbers reported correctly? I mean, there have been, reports both ways, over-reported, under-reported, are the numbers reported correctly? And is it a dangerous enough disease that we should be looking at really widespread vaccination? That's the first. And then after that, we are looking at stuff like, that was yesterday's post, vaccines safety, vaccines efficacy, and so on. And today we are looking, today's post was really about, when we talk about mandate, how do we then balance, personal good with public good, which is, I think, the point you were trying to make, right? You are on the side of the public good should be. But I think we're jumping the gun to say the public good should be, because first of all, is this disease even serious enough? Number two, do these vaccinations even work? And then we talk about, hey, should I sacrifice my rights for the community? So what do you think? What do you think about COVID? Do you think it is severe enough that we need vaccinations everywhere?
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the Serene, this is something that I've heard. Quite a lot actually since the pandemic first emerged last year, and one is a questioning around the data that we have access to, and a second point is questioning around even the virility of this particular disease. And I'm going to say that I am not unsympathetic to the view that we may not be provided with the quality of data that we need. And the reason I'm not unsympathetic to that is because regardless of which country you live in, whether it's here in Australia where I am, or Singapore where you are, or indeed a number of nations around the world, all of our governments, all of our federal and Commonwealth administrations do have a somewhat checkered history of being fast and loose with the truth in some way. So I think that unfortunately cultivates in people a certain skepticism about data and information. I'm not sure that skepticism is well placed here. I don't feel particularly doubtful, and when we use the information they are giving us, that obscures some important truths, I think. And so, for example, we can go to the World Health Organization. I'm of the view that if you're going to start questioning the legitimacy of every sort of information source, then we're kind of running out of options to do anything really. We need to at least have some fundamental level of trust. Yes, we can fiddle around the edges. We can say it may be over, it may be under, and it almost certainly is. I mean, it's going to be impossible to say exactly. But if we think in orders of magnitude, I'm comfortable with the order of magnitude that's been reported.
I think you've brought up a great point, because we actually have two comments. One from Bruce, who said, "You can have my jabs, I prefer to keep living," which tells me that the fundamental trust has actually been broken in what the medical community as a result has been talking about jabs. And another one who talks about, "I don't want to get a vaccine whose effects are unclear." So there's been a lot of WHO and a lot of other organizations going, "Hey, it's safe, it's safe, it's safe." But just in these two comments, I will say that, look, I am with you in saying I think there is a fundamental level of trust that a lot of people don't seem to have in the institutions that are supposed to be kind of like, quote unquote, protecting us. WHO, the medical community. I mean, what do you think of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And Serene, in relation to those two comments, I mean, my immediate response when I see Bruce's comment, my immediate response is to want to understand more about what he actually means there. What's the because I personally don't understand that dichotomy between being vaccinated, which I am, I'm fully vaccinated. I don't understand the dichotomy between being vaccinated and being alive. So I would, Bruce, if you're there and you're happy to share some more, I'd love to understand some more about your view there. In relation to the comment about the vaccine whose effects are unclear, again, my response would be to be curious about what would it take to be satisfied that there's efficacy and safety in this vaccine, as far as much as there's efficacy and safety in anything that we do. What would it take to convince? Is it, for example, a passage of time? Is it a number of people vaccinated? So I think it's important that when we encounter different views that are opposed to our own, the very first thing that we do is seek to understand more about what the other person is saying, rather than immediately going into combat to defend our own position.
Well, I think a couple of things. I mean, when it comes to effects, I've had to research a little bit about vaccinations over the course of this week, and I think there is a lot of talk about, hey, we don't know what is the long-term effect of this.
I guess that's true to some extent, and I'm going to preface this, of course, by saying I'm not a virologist. However, my understanding is that we've been vaccinating people with this particular vaccine now for roughly 18 months. We know, for example, with one of the vaccines, the AZ vaccine, that there's a rare clotting disorder that can emerge. I'm happy to say I had the AZ vaccine myself with zero side effects, except what you might expect, a little bit of 24-hour fatigue and soreness in the arm, but that tells me that the vaccine is doing its job. So there's no particular kind of concern that I have about that. However, this side effect does exist. We know that there's a side effect with the mRNA vaccines of carditis or pericarditis in some people, particularly younger people, it seems. We also know that COVID itself is a really, really terrible disease. And as much as these side effects might be present in vaccination, we know that there are things that are, for example, being called long COVID, the long-lasting effects of COVID infection, quite debilitating for some people. It does seem to, again, from what I understand, it does seem to be a disease that touches some people very lightly, and hits some other people really hard. But of course, you can't know which one of those people you are ahead of time. We are. I will say also in relation to vaccinations. As a child, I was vaccinated for things I probably can't even remember now: measles, mumps, I don't know, chicken pox, and things like that. Vaccinations have been part of my life for a long time. Here I am in my mid-50s, very healthy, living the life that I want. There's been no long-term effects from those vaccines. There's no particular reason, I think, to believe that there would be long-term unknown effects from this vaccine either. But that's it. I will say quite clearly that reflects my view. And again, I'm interested in understanding other perspectives here.
I think that brings us back to the two central questions, right? The first question is, number one, when you say COVID is so terrible, how terrible is it? Yeah, we looked at it. I mean, I've looked at the thing, and it's about 2% death, which is about 4 times that of a normal flu, and it is probably about a third or less than a third, because like heart diseases, for example, is a 7% death rate. So that's about a third. And when we are making that decision, right, okay, as to, what are my risks, this and that, I think a lot of people are also weighing that risk, right? Which is, hey, what are the chances of me getting COVID versus what are the chances of me getting, a side effect, for example. And one of the problems of human beings is it's very hard for us to estimate very small risk. So
Yeah.
I think I have a very small risk of actually getting COVID. I also have a very small risk of actually getting a side effect. Right. So it's both true, right? Both of it is true. And how am I going to weigh the very small risk of COVID versus the very small risk of side effect? I don't think this is a calculation that most humans can do. That's the way I'll put it, actually.
Yeah, I really agree with you there, Serene. That human beings generally are, I think human beings generally are poor at calculating risk, and I'll say that in the positive way too. Reward, we're not very good at calculating reward, which is really just a positive risk. And we're also not good once numbers start to get past a certain number of zeros, if you like, on the end, and then it starts to become meaningless for most people. So we are faced with that challenge of trying to support people to make choices about themselves, their lives, their futures, their own health and well-being, in the context of an inherent difficulty that we all have in doing the math on these things and coming to some reasonable conclusions. If you want evidence that people are really bad at calculating risk, have a look at how many people buy lottery tickets.
Well, I mean, Dog Connector has joined us, and she said this is the first, or he or she, okay, I'm not sure if it's a he or she, said that this is the first mRNA vaccine, and that normally, I mean, they're tested for like 10 years prior to being considered safe, and also that no vaccine has ever been proven to prevent or cure an illness. Okay. So I think, in the case of the first one, right, I do know that this is the first mRNA. I think neither of us are kind of qualified to speak on it, to be very frank, on the science behind an mRNA. And I won't speak on that. But I think where we are, where we have more expertise really is in that perception, right? Because the perception is, hey, why are we suddenly short-circuiting this whole process, right? A 10-year process, or at least a lengthy process of getting medications approved, and suddenly all that has been short-circuited, and for something that is, very something that's never existed, but for something this is the first time I've ever had it, and the perception of, hey, is it really safe? Quite contrary to whatever research has been out there, the perception is still that are we being guinea pigs of this new vaccine?
Yeah. And again, Serena, I would say these are absolutely reasonable points from which to start. So you're right. I don't understand the science of mRNA vaccines. I have a friend who does. He's tried to explain it to me. I kind of get little bits of it here and there. But what I do know from my conversations with him, and this is anecdotal, I can't immediately put my finger on a source for this, but mRNA, we need to think about mRNA and COVID as two different things. So, or COVID vaccine, I should say, as two different things. mRNA vaccines, in fact, have been in development, as I understand, for well over 10 years and perhaps even close to 20 years. And again, my understanding is that they've been looked at with respect to cancer treatment, cancer prevention, and so on. The understanding that I have is that we've arrived at if you like, a pleasant confluence of coincidence here, in that the development of mRNA technology has come quite a way in that time. And the task was then to take the novel coronavirus vaccine and find a way of putting those two together, which is my understanding of what's happened. That's true for only one vaccine type. The other vaccine type, which is the AZ, is based on an adenovirus. So it's kind of old vaccine technology, if you like. So I'm not sure. And I'm being tentative and respectful here. I'm not sure that it's correct to conclude that these have been rushed through. in the way that's often intended when it's said that way. The technology has been sitting there. Let me put another perspective on this though. There has never been a randomized control trial of parachutes. If you had to jump out of a burning plane, what would you choose to do?
True. But I think, okay, so I think there's a couple of other comments, which is that no vaccine has been proven to prevent or cure an illness. I don't think vaccines are meant to cure an illness, to be very frank. And I think of all of our vaccines, smallpox was the only one that was, prevented entirely. But, oh, no, sorry, this is not the one. This is the one I wanted to talk about. Yeah, which is, I think that there is, right? I mean, there is a program, at least in the United States, for reporting vaccine injury. And there's actually been Reuters has actually reported that how COVID is being controlled is actually quite different from all the other vaccines. Okay, so I'll pull up the article from Reuters, but basically what they're trying to say is that COVID injuries are not compensated the way that other vaccine injuries are compensated. They're compensated under an entirely different scheme, not under VERS. VERS is the vaccine injury and compensation scheme. And therefore, it's actually much harder for COVID victims to get compensation for vaccine injury. I mean, like all illnesses, there's always a certain amount of risk. Like all medication, there's always a certain amount of risk. And actually, that seems to be an issue at the moment. I'm not sure if you want to think about it. Yeah.
I don't have a lot to offer on that perspective, Serene. Other than to say, this is new territory for everyone, of course, there are absolutely challenges and difficulties along the way. Can we go back to one of those slightly earlier comments? There was something I wanted to say.
Which is the earlier comment you wanted to
the one that said talked about not preventing. Not preventing
illness. It's okay. Yeah, sure.
Not prevent or cure an illness. And one of the things that I think has happened in our discussions about COVID is that to some extent we've ended up polarizing things in really unhelpful ways. So, for example, we hear about the COVID death rate, which is relatively small, as you've just said. It's about 2%, and as we get better at diagnosis and as we get better at hospitalising and treating people, we would expect that death rate to decline even further, in the same way as it has for lots of diseases over time. But death is not the only metric here. Death is not the only thing that can happen. We're seeing people who are being affected by disease, not by vaccine, but by disease, and experiencing really long-lasting and debilitating symptoms that then impact their ability to work, to be in a relationship, to be productive, and so on. And they are all costs to both the individual and the community, quite apart from the risk of death. So while it's true, perhaps, that no vaccine has been proven to prevent or cure an illness, vaccines do prevent illness. And this is what we see in vaccination, that the people who have been vaccinated are much less likely to get seriously ill than people who are unvaccinated. And I think that's an important distinction. No, the vaccine doesn't cure COVID and doesn't prevent COVID infection.
No, it's actually meant to prevent. So, I mean, that's the whole point of vaccine, right? It's not meant to cure. I mean, by the time that you have the illnesses, the vaccine has failed you, basically. Yeah. The whole idea of a vaccine is to prevent you from having a illness in the first place. And I think really, I mean, I can't remember the stats off the top of my head, but I think initially you get something like 90%. And as time passes by, after 6 months or so, you get something like 75%, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So I mean, how much it can prevent for you, differs over time. But that's I think the whole idea, but not to cure.
And we see that with vaccines generally, don't we? For instance, if you have a tetanus vaccine, which prevents a really nasty and unpleasant death from animal bites and rusty nails and things like that, we know that the efficacy of that vaccine declines over time, and you have to go and have boosters. That's kind of unremarkable. And it's unremarkable here too that we might expect to have boosters in relation to that.
Yeah, and I think a couple of comments from the same person talking about how toxins cause illnesses and then viruses and so on. Well, I can only say this. So I am trained in conventional medicine as a nutritionist, as you know, but I'm also come from a background of TCM, like where for thousands of years Chinese look at illnesses in a completely different way. And I can only say this, that I don't think the two systems are quite compatible, is the way I would look at it. So you are really coming at it from an entirely different worldview, and it's not quite compatible, right? But one of the, quite apart from the theory, which quite frankly, I'm not qualified to speak on it in either case, I would say that if you look at the end results, a lot of traditional medicine is excellent when it comes to managing chronic illnesses, which much of modern medicine hasn't been helping, except for, take this pill and take it for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But when it comes to acute infections, acute illnesses and things like, COVID, which is an acute infection, I would say that, modern medicine trumps ancient medicine, hands down. This is the reason why we now live 80 years instead of 50 years. Yeah. But I will say that, that worldview, that trying to reconcile those two worldviews, at least in my own experience, is well nigh impossible. Just no way. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I, Serene, can I pick up on something you just said there, which I think is a really valuable perspective in this whole, not only this discussion, but any discussion at all. You've said it a couple of times. I've said it a couple of times. I'm not really qualified to speak on this, or I have no particular content knowledge here. And I think that is such an important thing to say in these discussions, and such an important thing to acknowledge, because of course one of the things that we've seen is all manner of people claiming all manner of consequences and outcomes from either this or that, or not doing this or not doing that. But in fact, very few of those people have the deep, studied, researched knowledge to be able to make those claims. And so, of course, there's no shame in not knowing something. There's no shame in not having an understanding and not knowing all the details. And one of the things that I would love to see in this whole debate is hearing more of that. I don't know.
Well, okay, let me put it this way. I think if we all have to be vaccine experts to decide if to take the vaccination, I think not many people will take it, because half of us, I think a lot of us are just taking it simply because we trust the medical community. We are like, okay, you say so, you must be right. I don't know, you know. Okay, you've studied for like X number of years. I trust that what you say is correct, and then we're just going on that. And so I'm just wondering whether the whole vaccine question is a question of how much do we still trust almost the authority structures in the world, right? I mean, why are we getting vaccinated? Do we know this vaccination in the in-depth enough to make that sort of clear, logical, evidence-based decision? No, I don't think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
We trust that, I hope WHO is not pulling a fast one on us. I think that's what it is.
And I think that's true. That's true of everything in life, Serene. When you take your car to the car mechanic, you trust that the car mechanic is making your engine work in the way that it's intended. I don't have that level of content knowledge about about car engines. One of the unfortunate things that I think has happened here, and this happens, of course, in very many circumstances, is that politics and health have become conflated. And so people have become less, understandably, I will say, less trustful of health advice because it's seen to have a political wrapping around it. And that's really regrettable, I think. That's very regrettable for ensuring that people have access to the best knowledge that they can have in order to make the best decision that they can make at the time.
Well, I mean, Dot has brought up another point, which actually I do see that happening as well, which is that if there's a doctor, if there's a scientist that speak against the vaccine, they are removed from social media. I think there is a decision being made that, hey, you know what, we are going to get this thing out for the common good. And a lot of I did a constructive argument post on this probably a month or two ago. And the media was highlighting this nurse, I believe, who was talking about how the vaccines are magnetic and it makes you magnetic and so on. And one of my commenters made a wonderful point, which is, look, there are very many valid medical reasons against this vaccine. And there are many sort of, well-respected medical doctors who have raised valid medical reasons against this vaccine. But none of that is being highlighted or brought into the discussion. Instead, these things are kind of being highlighted are more kind of quacks or people who are very far out. And the truth is, I think any medical advancement is up for debate. I mean, mRNA is a medical advancement. We're lucky to have it. But I think there will be valid medical concerns about any new illness or any new cure, vaccine. And I think we should hear the different viewpoints and stay away from kind of I don't know how to say it, almost the position taking that I'm seeing out there. There are valid concerns, for example, about anaphylaxis. There are valid concerns about, hey, there seems to be an increase in thrombosis. There seems to be an increase in heart problems. Is this something we should be looking at, especially?
Serene, I don't know if you can hear me, but I've lost your audio and your video is frozen. And I can't tell whether that's something with my connection or something with yours. Oh, there we go. It's resolving a little bit, I think.
I feel like I should cue conspiracy theories right now. No, I was thrown off. I was like completely thrown off. So I kind of feel like, maybe I like cue information about conspiracy theories at this point in time, right?
This is the new epsilon variant of COVID, which interferes with LinkedIn live broadcasts.
Oh, okay.
So Serene, for me, your video has become very unstable, and your audio as well. So I don't know whether you can hear me clearly or not, but I've lost you again. You're frozen.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I heard that just then. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to try my best to leave this room and then come back in like a minute to combat the epsilon COVID, and then I'll come back in like, just give me 1 minute.
So I should stay right
Yes, here. Yes. Please stay and speak about this.
I'll just fill some space. Well, I hope we do get this organised again soon, folks. I've been enjoying this discussion with Serene. Hopefully, she will be back very soon. I missed some myself, so everything froze for me. I jumped off and refreshed my connection and came back, and I think that's exactly what Serene is doing right now. Anyhow, would love to see you continue with comments and different perspectives. If you have a perspective on the question itself of our constructive argument, should vaccines be mandated, then love to hear your perspectives on that in the chat as well. And as soon as Serene's back, she'll be able to moderate that, and we can dive back in again. I'm hoping that something more drastic hasn't happened. Here she comes.
Can you hear me at all?
Oh yeah, that's better now. Couldn't before, but the audio's coming back.
What is the issue now? Yes, hi.
Much better, all good.
Yes. Okay. So yes, I'm going to cue all these conspiracy theories that I can, right? Like every conspiracy theory I can think about, right? Now, who is the one out there attacking me right now? What is it that I have said that is wrong, that is now causing this to happen to me, right?
So,
yes.
Serena, I think it's when we got chucked off a moment ago, there was a comment up about people speaking out, MDs and scientists being deplatformed from social media, and I wanted to share a perspective on that, if I may, which is that social media is not the platform for the promulgation of important health information. That's why we have robust peer-reviewed scientific journals where those ideas, which often, well, in fact, they start for everybody as germs of ideas to test, ideas to explore. That's where those ideas get tested, then peer-reviewed, then published. So social media is simply not the platform for exploring really complex research in health. It needs to be done elsewhere. It can certainly be shared on social media, but I'm not seeing large amounts of published research which show damage or danger. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I'm simply saying I'm not seeing it. That's all I wanted to say there. But Serena, I would love to swing back to our actual question here, which is with all of this going on. So with all of these ideas about relative safety and efficacy and so on, what should we do about mandating vaccines?
Well, I think I put up a post today.
To dig into that just a little bit more.
No, wait, hang on. Are you not hearing me anymore? Can you hear me now? Not hearing me. Is that what's happening?
Come back now. Yeah.
Okay, so
No,
I feel like, I'm not sure whether the powers that be will let me speak today. But what I was going to say is that I've put up a post today from Reuters also to talk about all the different countries that's mandated vaccination. In most of those countries, the mandation is actually kind of more, certain groups, healthcare workers, and so on and so forth. And then in like a handful of countries, it's everyone. And of these, I think the biggest one is Indonesia. And I was shocked when I realized it today, because they are the fourth largest country in the world in terms of population. And they have just mandated, apparently a couple months back, that everyone should be doing this. I mean, I will send you the link, but I was genuinely shocked. Like, wow, wow, for a couple of reasons. Because number one, I think setting aside whether or not, there's all these, how do I explain it? There's all these, should we do it? Is this a correct thing to do? It's morally right, and so on. The cost and the effort to do that is like, wow, I don't know. What do you think? From what perspective should we even start to think about this? Is this
Serene? For me, your audio has gone really
has gone terrible. Okay, let me do another thing. Let me switch to another.
Serene, your audio for me has gone really blocky again. Okay. So I'm not sure whether that's the way others are experiencing it as well.
So can you hear me well now? I'm using
catching bits of it.
Can you hear me well now? I'm using a different microphone.
Yeah, it wasn't. It's okay. It wasn't an issue of volume. It seemed to be an issue of bandwidth, because your video would freeze and then I would catch the speech would become blocky. But it looks smooth now.
Okay, great. Okay, so I don't know. Dot Connector has told us that both the audio is fine. Okay, yes, go on. Yeah, but
okay. So someone just shared that your audio is fine. Good. Okay. All right. That's good. So yeah, look, one of the I think to ask that question, should vaccines be mandated, kind of masks some other things that we should be asking. And one of those things that I think is worth asking is, imagine a scenario where you are already very unwell and being admitted to hospital. Would you want to be admitted to a hospital where the protocols around disease and infection control weren't particularly strong? Because that's one possibility here. Would you want to be served? Would you want to go and have dental treatment, for example, or go and see an optometrist or an ophthalmologist? And I'm trying to think of healthcare professions where people are in close quarters to each other here. Imagine those scenarios or those situations where you might find yourself. Would you want that? And if we take that out another layer, even if you're not concerned yourself, if you are convicted of the robustness of your own immune system, viruses don't really care about that. They're happy to use you as a host and then go and infect someone else, perhaps your neighbour or your relative who's not as well as you are. So these are some of the difficult things that I think we need to consider here in this broader question about whether we mandate vaccines.
Yeah. I think. Oh my. I can hear myself speak. Is that an issue with my sound again?
It's not for me. It's all good for me.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay. So, I think one of the issues is exactly like what you said, right? Which is a lot of the times we're not so much taking the vaccinations for ourselves. And maybe we're young, our risk is not so high. We're actually taking it for the people around us. And then there is this almost question about, where do we draw the line, right? Like at what point would we say, hey, this is for the greater good as opposed to this is for this is for me, right? I don't need it actually. But then I'm doing this for whether it be community health or even for the people who are caretakers. And actually, I think Bruce is back and he has said something interesting. He says that he would rather his caretakers be unvaccinated because the vaccinated are super spreaders. And I think I have heard this being said, to be very frank, I've heard it being said that, hey, because you're vaccinated, you don't show much symptoms. And as a result, even if you have COVID, you can then now spread it.
Yeah.
Have you heard this?
Look, I've heard things like that, but I'd be interested if Bruce could share some information that might support that, because it seems, I mean, there's no real way of being able to evaluate a comment just on that basis. But again, I will say, all of these things that we talk about always start as germs of ideas and curious concerns that we have. And we ought to take the time to, and when I say we, I'm talking partly about us as individuals, but also the research community, take the time to investigate these things. But yeah, look, I don't feel able to comment any further on that particular view, Serene.
No, I actually am going to pull up another one. So this says me rather than Naoto, because after I got thrown off, I wasn't able to share Naoto's comment, and I apologize for that, Naoto. And actually, you know what? I hate to say this, but I agree.
Look, I'm with you, Serene. I find this a reasonably compelling argument. That it's like Mother Earth kicking some dirt back in our faces.
Just think about the amount of blue skies that has come up last year.
Yeah.
The amount of carbon emissions that we have managed to backtrack, right?
Yeah.
And if you really think about it, right, like, wow, maybe that it is something that Mother Earth is doing.
Yeah. And interestingly, I think one of the views that we often have as humans, and I don't know exactly how many of us there are on the planet now, 7.5 billion, I think.
7.9. This the last.
7.9. Okay, nearly 8 billion. Okay, nearly 8 billion. One of the views that we often internalize is this idea that we live on Earth. The real truth, of course, is that we are part of the Earth. We can no more separate ourselves out as some individualized system than we can anything else. We are part of this. So we're not simply standing here with the Earth as our resource. We're part of this whole kind of living, breathing organism, if you like. So, look, I find myself quite sympathetic to that view that you've shared just there. Yeah, which is not a reason not to stop, think about what we're doing, do things differently, protect people, and so on. I don't think that necessarily impacts our discussion about vaccination, but I think in broader terms, it ought to give us pause for consideration.
Yeah, and I think that there's been quite a few comments from Dot Connector. Unfortunately, I can't bring up all the comments, but quite a few of the comments relate in particular to USA. And for example, talking about US propaganda and talking about what's happening in the States. And I think one of that really is, at least one of it really is this almost this system, right? When I look at the system, I don't think it's healthy anymore. I think this is something that probably a lot of people will look at it and go like, yeah, it's not healthy. And therefore, we then start to ask ourselves, where have we gone wrong? And I think Dodd has says that it's good for mankind to destroy economies and supply chains and leave abuse victims at home with their abuse. Well, I will not say that it is good for mankind to destroy economies, but I will say it is good for mankind to rethink our economies. I think the way that we have been structuring economics and business is just plain wrong. I mean, there's only one thing in the world that grows nonstop, and that's a cancer tumor.
Yeah.
But most, right, I mean, I think you agree with me. I mean, what grows nonstop? But everything grows and stops. But, what is the number one matrix of most businesses? To grow and grow and grow and grow. And build value for shareholders quite in disregard of things like our environment or, other stakeholders, for instance. And so I think that ties back to all these fears, right? All this conspiracy almost about COVID. I will not deny that there are many, many worldviews. I mean, we've talked about toxins, we've talked about traditional medicine. There's many, many worldviews, and quite possibly they're all valid in different ways. But I think all the conspiracy points not just to a different worldview. I mean, I know TCM doctors who are vaccinated, but almost to a distrust of this system, to a, hey, where have we gone wrong? And can we still trust that this system is out, that this system is working the way it should be working? I'm not sure if that's kind of how you feel. I mean, so when you say, yes, we have to mandate this vaccination, I think your answer then becomes, do I trust the system enough to follow the law that says this is the one way that is good for me and that is good for my community? I don't think many of us go out there to destroy our communities, but it's more are you sure? I don't trust you, so I don't know if I should trust you when you say that this is good for me and my community anymore.
Yeah, and I think, Serena, I think you've touched on a really important point. And again, this is something that relates not just to this topic of debate, but indeed the whole idea of engaging in any sort of discussion about anything. And that is that while we see lots of I'm going to call them just dismissive responses. So when people disagree with each other, they're dismissed from social media platforms or whatever it may be. We do see a lot of that going on, and a different way of thinking about this is to start with the assumption that whatever someone is expressing, there's a value or a reason or a sincerely held belief behind it. Now, we need to be careful here because sincerely held beliefs don't necessarily carry any weight. I can believe with all my heart that gravity doesn't exist, but gravity is going to win every single time. Simple fact. However, that doesn't mean that we can't stop and take the time to engage in discussion and find out what those views are, what those beliefs are, what are the concerns, what are the fears of the person, what are their wishes for themselves, what are their desires for their own health and well-being, what are their desires for themselves and their communities, what are their desires for the communities in which they live, what do they want in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now. And it's those, I call them big questions, it's those big questions that we often, we just forget to ask them. We immediately dive into kind of squabbling in the sand tray over this or that, and forget that there are always some much, much bigger questions to ask here, to consider here, and to take the time to listen to. And I will say that the whole issue of not just vaccines, but COVID itself, has really shone a light for me, and I'm speaking now with my psychologist and coach hat on. It's shone a light for me on the extent to which we listen to respond, not listen to understand. And that alone would make a huge difference here. If everyone who shared something was prepared to listen to understand the perspective of another, I think our whole discussion would look different.
I think, we're coming to the top of the hour, and I think what you've just said really resonated with me. I struggled for years when I looked at the vaccination of my child. When my child was first born, and I looked at it, and I was like, oh, should I vaccinate him? And why should I vaccinate him? And so on. And I found that discussions with both pro-vaccine and anti-vaxxers were impossible to conduct. I was in, both in the pro-vaxxers forums, groups, WhatsApp chat groups, and also those of the anti-vaxxers. And I just found that it was so difficult to have any kind of conversation. It was so difficult to pull out the real science of it. To really kind of understand that, okay, what does the evidence say here, rather than just, oh, we should all get vaccinated, oh, we should never get vaccinated. And what actually is the most kind of reasonable, plan of action, or what's the most reasonable thing that we should do? And what is my personal choice, which may not be the same personal choice as somebody else, or which may not be a personal choice that I almost wanted to say, which may not be the personal choice that is approved by authorities, because the best choice for public health is not necessarily the best choice for me personally. Exactly. Unfortunately, that is true. Unfortunately, that is true, right? So, if I judge the very slim chances of me getting a side effect from COVID to be higher than the very slim chance of me getting COVID, I may choose not to get vaccinated, even if actually for public health I should, because if not, then I am actually endangering people who have a completely different risk profile than me, and who, may then get COVID from me. I can be very blunt and tell you that I got vaccinated because I have elderly, in-laws and parents, and to me is, okay, I don't care what happens to me if they can be safe. So really that was like my number one consideration, right? But would I make that choice for the whole, the general public health? No. I'm sorry, I'm not that altruistic, so the answer is no. Right? But I guess for us then is this, right? Which is, can we sit down and really have this conversation, right, from both sides, with the view to understanding, and with the view to, like what you said, to respect that the other person may make different choices from us. It does not mean, or it does not give us a choice, the right to automatically dismiss them as being crazy or deluded or whatever the word it is.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to say? In closing, for all the people with us today.
Just the only, I guess the thing that's and from the comments that you've been sharing, Serene, as we've gone tonight, the thing that I've been convicted of again during our discussion is the importance of, and I think my views are pretty clear on this, but the importance of taking the time to understand deeply when someone expresses a view about something, taking the time to understand that, and taking the time to understand how that view is held, how it's been formed, what supports it, and so on, and with the genuine intention and genuine goodwill in wanting to understand that person's experience, not simply listening for a few key words so I can shoot it down in flames, but really working hard to try and understand the experience of another person.
So, and with that, thank you very much for Dr. Nectar, Bruce, even for Ayoma, I apologize, Ayoma. All of you have joined us today. I don't think that we are the be all and end all of this discussion, but I hope that we have been able to bring you perspectives and on this issue that you haven't thought of before. And most of all, I hope that the next time you have a conversation with somebody on this topic, and this is like a hot potato topic right now, who has completely different views from you, that you can think about what Simon has just said, which is that, hey, maybe it's time for us to kind of sit down and really look at this and really think about, hey, where is this person coming from? And can we have a conversation with respect? So thank you very much, Simon. If you want to get in touch with him, this is his LinkedIn. And I hope you guys have had a good discussion with us this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Serene.